You are listening to The Thought Leaders Show with the world's cutting-edge, hottest innovators, influencers, and impact makers today. If you are looking for inspiration and motivation, listen in. Welcome to The Thought Leaders Show. Now, here's your host.
Hi, this is Tammy Patzer, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Karen Brynes Allen. She is an integrative health practitioner, educator, author, and nationally awarded thought leader with 25 years of experience. Her most recent work has been in the area of languaging the extraordinary. She joins us today to talk about that. Welcome, Karen. So, Karen, languaging the extraordinary. That is such an unusual phrase. Tell me, what exactly does that mean?
Thanks, Tammy. It is an unusual phrase, isn't it? You know, we easily find words for everyday things, for things that we can see, a shoe, a couch, a chair, a cup. And for people that we know, he's tall, he's short, he has blue eyes. Things that are objective and measurable parts of our experience. And all of those are outside of us, objective things. And the subjective, our internal experience, sometimes those are harder to find, harder to phrase, harder to quantify. You know, one of the subjective experiences that we all have is love. But you can never say, yes, I am going to give you 3.25 love units today. You know, we don't have units for emotions or for confidence or for clarity or focus or any of the subjective experiences. So the words that we have that work well tend to be in the realm of the ordinary. But we as people, we're really interested in things that are extraordinary. In fiction, look at the popularity of the Marvel films of Thor and Loki and all of the things that come from imagination. Look at the popularity of the Harry Potter book series and all of the ideas about Hogwarts School of Magic. You know, we as people are fascinated by and really curious about the extraordinary. And sometimes extraordinary comes into our real world. You know, there are people who have unusual gifts, people who have photographic memories that are clearly outside of the realm of anything that's normal, or people who have some kind of incredible intuitive perception. They can read minds, or they have some kind of spiritual gift. And some of these things are completely measurable in labs. We can quantify the outcomes. We can have concrete proof of what this does. But the extraordinary experience isn't so easy to talk about.
I think that you're really hitting on something here because like you said, there are so many things about our lives, and you hear people say, well, if I see it, I'll believe it. Or other people say, well, I have faith, faith in God, even though you can't see it. And like you said, there's many things that are measurable in laboratory conditions, and everyone is seeking this evidence. So tell me more. Are there other categories of extraordinary beyond fiction and these unusual gifts?
Probably the most interesting category of extraordinary is what we would file under surreal. These are experiences that are beyond ordinary and beyond measurable. And one might think, oh, well, if they're beyond ordinary and they're beyond measurable, that means that they're very rare. or uncommon. There was a research study that was done in the UK where people were asked, have you ever had an extraordinary experience in your life that you are not able to account for by any common cause? And some people reported, yes, they'd had a spiritual experience. Some people had had some kind of odd animal communication experience. Some people had had an incredible feats of heroism, or many people who responded to the survey said, absolutely. And then the next question they asked was, have you ever told anyone about this? And almost everyone said no. They said they had never mentioned it to anyone. Now, this brings into focus the importance of languaging the extraordinary. These things that happen, these experiences beyond ordinary that we might not be able to talk about, that may be very real to us. And for some of us, it's the most important thing that's ever happened to us. But we may not be able to talk about it. And these surreal experiences fall into a few different categories. There's the experience that's almost an urban legend of some kind of superhuman strength. The mom that lifts the car off of her baby. And from a clinical, psychological, and physiological perspective, it's actually called hysterical strength. The idea that strength is brought forward in a moment of biological need that could not be accounted for in any other way, that can only be described as extraordinary. One of the examples that's given of this is from Florida in 2008. This is a very well documented case of a firefighter named Chris Hickman who came to the scene of a car crash. And a Chevrolet Blazer had flipped over and landed on its side, and it was pinning the driver's arm between the vehicle and the pavement. And the firefighter, Hickman, picked up the SUV about a foot off the ground so that the other firefighters could move this trapped driver, something that there was no biological basis for, to be able to lift a vehicle a foot high off the ground in that way. This is an example of this kind of surreal experience that, how do you talk about that without some level of awe, of denial, of, people have big reactions to things like that. Another category of the surreal kind of extraordinary has to do with healings. Healings by prayer, laying on of hands, distance healing by intention. And there was a very clear recent example of this in a area southeast of Austin. There was a little girl named Roxley Doss. I think she was 10 years old, and she had an inoperable brain tumor, uncurable. She had radiation, but it was very clear that this was not something that could be removed. There were no cases of it being cured. And so her prognosis was very, very poor. Her family and her church prayed for her. And they were very, very devout and very intense about the way that they sought relief for her from God. And the next time she went in to see her doctor, they did another MRI scan to measure the growth of the tumor, the advancement of the condition. And what they found was that the tumor was gone. Now, this wasn't hearsay. It wasn't someone's imagination. It wasn't like somebody thought it was gone. This was an MRI scan that showed that clearly it was gone. Now, in medical terms, this gets filed under a spontaneous remission. Oh, sometimes bodies do this. They just repair themselves. We don't know why. We don't know how to make it happen. We just know that it happens. And from her family and church's point of view, they absolutely saw this as an answer to prayer. Something that was very sacred had happened to her. And so, how do you talk about this in a medical setting? How do you talk about this in a medical conference where it tends to be framed as unexplained spontaneous remission and not attributed to what the people involved attributed it to? And this is one of those things where we don't have language of measurement. We don't have a way to prove anything, which is why it ends up in the category of extraordinary beyond some kind of clear words of explanation. Another example of these surreal categories is animal interactions. There are repeated examples of dolphins rescuing humans from interactions with with sharks, where people have been bitten by a shark, or sharks have come and are circling people, and dolphins come and get in the way. There was a very well documented case of this from 2007 with a surfer named Todd Indris, who was bitten by a great white shark twice and bleeding intensely in the water. And a school of bottlenose dolphins came and surrounded him, forming a barrier between him and the shark, circling around him and helping him to get to shore at where he recovered. He had severe wounds, but he certainly wasn't eaten by the shark. Now, there are case after case after case of this, and this is one of those things, again, that is a surreal, extraordinary experience. Another category of this is accidental deaths by ridiculous freak odds. There was a case in Oakland of a man who was killed by a fire hydrant that flew through the air about a block and a half after it had been hit by a car that ran off the road. And it hit the man on the head, bounced through a fence and into another yard, and killed this guy. It was one of those instances of freak odds that you could not possibly have predicted. And this is another category of extraordinary. And then there are people who have near-death experiences where their subjective experience is that they see God, they see angels, they see heaven, they see hell, they see and experience something totally out of the human realm. One of the most famous of these more recently was by Ibn Alexander, who was a neurosurgeon who was clinically dead at the time and had an amazing experience and wrote a book about it. And this created a lot of stonewalling around him from the medical community that just couldn't go there with the language that he was using. And probably one of the most difficult for people to relate to, if you haven't had the experience, is an extraterrestrial interaction. People who have the experience of seeing some kind of alien or some kind of otherworldly being that comes to them, takes them onto a ship, takes them into another dimension. And there are quite a few extremely well-documented cases of this where under hypnotic regression or some other truth serum drug, people tell amazing stories again and again with the exact same wording, something that is very unlikely to be true with fiction. All of these are extraordinary experiences beyond fiction, beyond unusual gifts. All of them are things that our society has trouble languaging.
I think that's so interesting because you've said it and it's woven into all these explanations, how in the world we live in today, we have trouble, like what you said, languaging different phenomenons that happen. We always are like the one about the spontaneous remission or the freak odds, those are extraordinary things. And my mother told me about it when she had me when I was born. She got very, very sick and she wanted to die. And she said that her father, who had died a year earlier, came to the end of her bed and told her, no, you have responsibilities. You can't come.
Wow. Wow.
And I still remember that. And then she also told me about being visited by an angel also, because she, was very ill. And, in her mind at the time, she did not want to live. But it was true. If she just had a newborn baby, and plus she had 3 other children at home, she had a lot of responsibility. So I think all of your examples are really good because they really are extraordinary. And it's also interesting because human beings are very interested in the extraordinary. But like you said, a lot of things get blocked when we have these extraordinary happenings. So, how do people respond to hearing about or seeing something extraordinary?
Well, a lot of times the reactions are quite strong. One of them, some of it depends on how open-minded that person is. Because you're asking someone to step out of the realm of usual and normal into the extraordinary. So sometimes people are curious. Oh, wow. How is that possible? Could that happen for me? If for example, your mom saw an angel, or she had someone, her father who had passed, came to her and talked to her. Someone who was curious about that might think to themselves, oh, wow, I wonder how that happens. I wonder if I could get to talk to my dad. I got questions for that guy, or there would be an openness and a curiosity, I want to learn more about this. And I actually think this is a fairly rare response based on my experience. The next one is discomfort. And when someone who doesn't believe in angels or doesn't believe in prayer is faced with the idea of spontaneous remission of a girl's tumor, then it's very easy to be a skeptic and to scoff. And sometimes the reaction that comes up is anger and ridicule. And one of the things that I've spoken with repeatedly with my clients is about their experience of being ridiculed by their primary care practitioner for seeing someone in the alternative care world. Even if they didn't have a solution, the fact that the client had gone outside to an alternative practitioner and comes back and says, well, I'm better. Well, what did you do to make you better? Well, I went to see this alternative practitioner and this is what we did. And they get lectured. Oh, that's voodoo medicine. You shouldn't be doing that. Why are you wasting your money on that? Instead of having this gentle curiosity to say, oh, how is that possible? How did you have this outcome? And it's easier to step back into the rigidity of the beliefs within the Newtonian paradigm, within the linear, known, documented world. So very often the response is shock and disbelief. I don't believe it. That's crazy. How could that possibly happen? And for example, with the fellow in Florida who picked up the Chevy Blazer, I can imagine someone hearing that story saying, are there really pictures of that? Did that really happen? And I think within all of us, there's an inner scoffer, an inner doubter that says, should I really believe this? What would the world be like if this were true? Do you ever have that experience, Tammy, for you? What would the world be like if this extraordinary thing that I tend to disbelieve, what if it were true?
It's funny that you asked that question, because when you use that example of the fireman who lifted the car, I was like, wow, that's cool. And so I had the curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had, the other little side of me was, I wonder if that's really
Really true.
and and then again I had the awe, and again when I'm thinking about your examples that you've had, I was thinking, again, I know I've had lots of curiosity reactions. I have had different discomfort reactions to different types of things. And I know when it comes to the alternative medicine or spiritual things, many people, even if they're curious, they may be very closed to anything that is different than what they were taught by their parents or in the community that they grew up in, and they're very close to any possibilities because of that discomfort that well, what if everything I believed in and was told was true turns out not to be true?
Yes,
Just
yes.
like doctors, we so many people, they give that doctor so much power, when the fact is, in the world, especially today, we have a lot of resources to look up information and to educate ourselves and to go talk to people who have spent years doing things that may be um, not considered traditional medicine, but yet if you look at the history of medicine and you go to the Eastern cultures and to India, China, and different places, they have been doing things that may not be um, Western medicine, where they say, here's a pill, but yet it works, and they have proof and documentation, just as much as you would if you were to be given a pill, that sometimes something else works. So it's very interesting. Like I said, as you were giving these examples, I actually did go through a little mental checklist. Lucky for me, I typically start with curiosity, and if I am a little uncomfortable, it's like, well, find out more.
Yeah.
What
You
else?
have an openness in
Yeah,
that
and
way.
that's
Yeah.
me, and I'm very thankful for that. And that's really interesting. So this language, you're doing this research on this language, um, and so are you trying to find words that are acceptable to these people that are the scoffers, I guess is a good way, or
Or the curious, or those who are in awe. One of the other strong reactions is awe. When people are in the presence of something greater than themselves, and this tends to happen in spiritual realms or in nature, even, um, where people have tears that come to them. They have profound humility that comes to them. So, this experience of curiosity, of discomfort, of awe, all of these strong reactions can be wordless, or they can be full of lots of words. But the words very often do not capture something this big and this extraordinary. So, extraordinary, kind of by definition, exists out of the realm of normal language. We have words for the ordinary: shoe, cabinet, tall, blue eyes. And we have words for things that have to do with Newtonian physics. This ball rolls from here to there. It travels at a certain speed. We can measure it. This is where the world of quantifiable science lives. This is where we are able to look at what's going on outside of us. And so that's the languaging that we're all used to. And these words represent objects and concepts that are in a linear world. When we want to describe something that represents the extraordinary, this is like a new tectonic plate on the planet. This is a new terrain. Very often, there are complex experiences without words. For example, if you read the experiences of either the Far Eastern mystics or the Christian mystics, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, or the anonymous author of The Cloud of Unknowing, they all speak about how their experience with the divine is beyond language and that they cannot put it in the crude terms of linear thought that language requires. And people who have had experiences, say, with an extraterrestrial event, and this honestly is one of the one that gets the most scoffers, which make people very defensive and very hesitant to speak about it. People who have religious experiences, who have alien experiences, who have animal communication experiences, these people do become hesitant to say something because these are very complex experiences without words, and where the best we can do is to approximate. If you've never had a strawberry, you've never eaten a strawberry in your life, and somebody offers you one, and you say, "What does it taste like?" How is that person going to describe strawberry to you? How would you describe the flavor, the subjective experience of strawberry to someone else? Now let's imagine that there is a particular experience that you've had, maybe one of incredible awe in nature, where you became part of the trees. I'm just making one up. How do you describe that experience of blending with the nature of tree-ness? Or where you have an experience of being in the presence of an angel or something divine, or the presence of an alien or an animal that you're talking with. There's some interaction that is so far beyond normal that in general, people very often say there are no words to describe this. And part of what I'm investigating is, truly, are there no words, or is there an unwillingness to describe it because the flack has been so bad every time someone has spoken about this extraordinary event that they've had? And so I've been interviewing people about the extraordinary events that they've had and the way that they experience them, the way that they talk to themselves about them, and the way that they would try to or decide not to talk about them with others. And the languaging that we use to discuss this, by subtle descriptors, we can put very positive or negative nuance on it. We can say that someone is resting with language that makes it seem like that person has a well-deserved rest, and this is very positive self-care. Or we can say that someone is resting with language that makes them seem like a lazy slob who can't get their tuchus off the couch. And depending on the specific words that we use, that can open up or close down the receptivity of other people. Now, this becomes really important, Tammy, in a medical setting. if we look at the connection between spirituality and health, imagine someone who is in a hospice setting, who has an experience of being visited by an angel and wants to talk to their physician about it. And this is not part of the belief system of their doc or their nurse. And so that languaging isn't there. The conversation isn't possible to be had, even though it may be the most important experience in that person's life. This is the work that I'm involved in now, to build a bridge from the ordinary into the languaging of the extraordinary, to widen the conversations that we are able to have about the most important experiences of our life.
Wow, that is really phenomenal. And again, you're opening that door to that, like you said, you're creating a bridge, because can you imagine if you were in hospice care and you were visited by an angel, and the angel more than likely was telling you, hey, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. I'm here for you. Calm down. And you wanted to talk to your doctor, and you told the doctor, the first thing that I imagine out of the doctor and nurse's mouth would be that you're hallucinating.
Yes.
And so they would be discounting your experience. And I think that's why the work that you're doing is so important, to put some type of language to bridge this gap between what people are saying, so that people could actually talk about these very complex situations, feelings, and the way they're being, in a way that is so they don't feel disconnected, and that they feel more accepted. So
yes, this brings up a really interesting point. There is a placebo effect that happens when a person's experience is validated. When someone's genuine, truthful experience is reflected back to them, we know from research that it reduces pain, it increases confidence in recovery, people get better quicker, faster, easier. There's a placebo effect from affirming the extraordinary experiences that people have. And there is also, to the point that you brought up, where the doc or the nurse, whether they say it to the patient directly or whether they say it to each other, the doc may turn to the nurse and say, this patient is hallucinating. Let's adjust the medications, without actually responding at all to what the patient has just shared. And this is not necessarily because the doc is unfeeling or upset or, in denial or anything else. It's because the doc is focused on the care for this individual, and it's not part of their ideation that this could even happen. And this is like the negative equivalent of a placebo, which is called a nocebo effect. This is where the denial of the person's experience, the fact of, oh no, I didn't just see an angel, I'm just having a hallucination. I must be way sicker than I thought. There is a negative impact of this. And that, again, is part of why the way that we language this becomes very important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, it's such a fascinating topic. I bet we could talk about this for hours and hours. But I want you to tell everyone how they can find out more about your work.
Absolutely. I talk about this more, about languaging the extraordinary, in my podcast series. And you can find out about this and the speaking that I'm doing and the writing that I'm doing on my website, which is www.languagingtheextraordinary.com. talkingyourwalk.com. And the podcast is called Talking Your Walk, the Placebo and Nocebo Effect of Languaging the Extraordinary. And I welcome all of your listeners to come check it out. And Tammy, thank you so much for having me on your show and for the interesting conversation about this topic.
Oh, well, thank you, Karen. Everyone, we've been talking with Karen Brynes Allen, and you can go find out more at talkingyourwalk.com. Check out that website and Karen's podcast, and I'm sure that there's more to come, and it's very interesting. I think this is a book, Karen,
I actually am working on it. I don't have a publication date yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm definitely working on it. Thank you.
Okay, well, the good news is that we've just gotten a little hint of what you're working on, and I really appreciate that. Again, it's Talking Your Walk, talkingyourwalk.com. Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been listening to the Thought Leaders Show. To get all past shows and to get all future shows, go to thoughtleadersshow.com.